Outside of the Bible, the greatest two documents that have ever been penned are the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. And the reason those two documents have lasted for 230 years is because they were written on the knees of the framers.
This is the voice of the Colorado Liberty Movement.
I'm not a sixth grader. It's fine you want to lecture me on the Constitution. I studied the Constitution myself. I am reasonably well educated.
Live from Studio 56, this is Grassroots Radio Colorado.
Let's be clear about one thing. We're not here to rebrand a party. We're not here to put a fresh coat of rhetorical paint on our party. We're not here to abandon our principles in a contest of government giveaways. We're here to rebuild a country.
Now, Grassroots Radio Colorado on KLZ 560.
Freedom, liberty, truth.
American woman said get away. American woman, listen what I say.
Rockin' and rollin', it's actually the American man tonight. Jimmy Sengenberger filling in for Chris Cook. You know, I haven't actually been here on this variation of Grassroots Radio Colorado, hosted by Chris, and it is a pleasure and a privilege to finally be with you in the evening here on KLZ 560. Always so much fun to be with you. If you want to be with me, part of the program, share your thoughts, your opinions, whatever. 303-477-5600 is the telephone number to do just that. Would love your perspective. We've got a great show for you this evening. In the next hour, bottom of the next hour, 7:30, we're going to be joined by Rich Bratton of Principles of Liberty, going through some of the key things happening right now in the legislative session. Always a great thing that's done here on KLZ 560 is to make sure that you are consistently kept up to date all the time, as you need to know what's going on at the state legislature. That'll be great. At the bottom of the hour, you know her, especially from her advocacy and defense for our gun rights. Laura Carno will be joining us to talk about Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton deciding previously, while she was Secretary of State, that for convenience purposes, and she's been very clear on this, for convenience, she wanted to have one email address, a personal email address, and her own server. Isn't that just wonderful? Isn't that exciting? Well, now she's caught up in some controversy. She's been trying to defend it, but are her defenses, is her explanation sensible? I mean, I'm just thinking about it. She's trying to say, we only need, or in order to have an email system the way I wanted it, with only one device, I had to have one email address and make this my private email address. I guess she didn't realize that there's such a thing called apps, and that there's more than one kind of app, and that you're physically able to create more than one email address of different types and utilize them on your phone, sometimes even in the same app. Yes, I know. It's mind-blowing. And this was actually something in place back in 2008. This is something that Hillary could have done, but, you know, I guess she's just not tech-savvy enough. You know, in a way, it kind of reminds me of, although the media went after George H.W. Bush for this, but remember when Bush Sr. went to the grocery store and was asking questions about the scanner that was used at the grocery store? He was actually just asking questions about the new model. But the people in the media, of course, tried to make it seem like he had no idea what this technology was about, period. That he was confused, thrown for a loop. What is this scanning device? Well, isn't it something that could be said similarly about Hillary now with the technology today? I mean, this was supposed to be the most technologically advanced administration, the one that's most technologically adept. And yet they had a Secretary of State who could not even recognize that she could use more than one email address on one cellular device. Not a new concept. It's been around for a little while now. But is that explanation one that we can buy, or is there more to it? We're also learning news now, today, that senior officials under Hillary Clinton actually did this exact same thing, that at least 2 utilized private email addresses. And Obama is even being asked whether or not he's used a private email address. And of course, his administration is trying not to answer that question. But Hillary's 2 top aides using personal email, this thing is growing, and there's a reason why the left has been hammering her too. Did you watch MSNBC last week at all? If you didn't, you missed some fireworks. You need to go to realclearpolitics.com, to YouTube, wherever. Because the way that these guys were roasting and toasting Hillary Clinton, I thought I was watching Fox News half the time. It was absolutely incredible getting this sense that they're actually outraged about a Democrat and about Hillary. Now, I think a big part of it is that the left wants to get it out of the way now, so that when she's the nominee in November, people forget it. It's old news. It's not something that is important any longer. Of course, it's our job to make it seem like it's prescient, regardless of the time factor, that moving into November of next year, or as we get closer to November of 2016 at least, it stays in the forefront of people's minds. We cannot allow the media to eventually set it aside because their chosen candidate, their Hillary, their new Clinton, could be harmed by it. Of course, there's another possibility here, and that is that folks at MSNBC don't like Hillary Clinton because they find her to be too moderate. I think it's kind of a ridiculous proposition, but nevertheless, it's something that many on the left feel, is that Hillary Clinton is too moderate. She's not liberal enough. So they would like to see Hillary get hurt so that an Elizabeth Warren or a Bernie Sanders, if he were to switch to the Democratic Party from being a registered independent, of course, he's the senator from Vermont, one of these far left people were to be able to then utilize this opportunity as an opening. Now, I think they're deluding themselves if they think it's something that really is possible. There is no Barack Obama in 2016 to defeat Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary, but they're going to try. And that's one of 2 possibilities, I think, why the left has been attacking Hillary pretty darn viciously over the last week and a half on this story. It's either because they want to get it out of the way now so that next year things are better for Hillary on some of these scandals and issues. They're non-issues by that point, or they want it to be non-issues. Or 2, they want to pave the way for a further left candidate by weakening Hillary right now. Of course, there are Democrats who've been lining up behind Hillary, who've been coming to her defense, but nevertheless, it is still impressive on some level to see the media hammer Hillary, where yesterday she felt like she had to go and speak on this topic. She's not even a candidate for president yet. And she realized that she had to get out in front of this. Of course, her excuse was just your basic, it's convenience. All I wanted to do was deal with something that would be convenient for me. Never mind national security. Never mind State Department rules and whether or not I was setting a good example for the members of my department. Never mind any of that. Because I'm Hillary Clinton, I can do whatever I want, and I just want convenience. You know, Bill wanted convenience too. We know how much trouble that ended up getting him into. Hillary, you better watch yourself just a little bit. But what do you think? Do you think that this is something that is concocted by the media now in order, or being brought up by them now, even the New York Times having made this a front page story, so that it can be an issue thrown by the wayside next year, or maybe that it paves the way for a more left-wing contender to come up? Or is there some other theory that you might have? 303-477-5600 is the telephone number to share your thoughts. We'll get Laura Carno's opinion at the bottom of the hour right here on Grassroots Radio Colorado with Jimmy Sengenberger filling in for Chris Cook. We will be right back and continue this discussion, and we've got a lot more topics to fly through in the next couple of hours, so keep it right here on KLZ 560. One of the things that I have to do, I have no choice but to do this whenever I take over a show, is to make my mark by choosing some bumper music. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, in for Chris Cook this evening here on Grassroots Radio Colorado, KLZ 560. Nothing like a little Stevie Ray Vaughan SRV to get you revved up and ready to go for a great evening after an absolutely beautiful day. 303-477-5600 is the telephone number here on KLZ 560. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening. You know, I want to take a few minutes right now to take off the partisan political hat that I was just expressing in the last segment when we were talking about Hillary Clinton. I'll put it back on in a few moments, particularly when we bring on Laura Carno to continue discussing that news story. But I want to talk to you about something that is not about partisanship. It's not about politics. It's not about these political lines that we like to draw. It's just about who we are as a people, as Americans. And that is, and we hear it in the beginning of this program, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Two seminal documents in human history that laid forth the tenets of freedom, the promises of freedom, and how we would fulfill freedom for generations and generations to come. You've probably heard my ad going around for the Liberty Day Institute, of which I am the president and CEO. We are a 501c3, that means tax-deductible nonprofit, that's all about educating youth about our nation's founding documents, talking about, of course, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Nonpartisan and non-political, supported by Democrats and Republicans alike, and in very vigorous ways as well. It is all about making sure that our kids, fifth graders in particular, get an effective introduction to the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration. What we provide are these Constitution books, copies of the Constitution that are legible. There are a lot of Constitution books, pocket size, that just have small font that aren't really good for kids to be able to read. It's more of a challenge in that case. So we make sure that it's legible for kids. Then also inside are 24 questions and answers on flashcards, a great learning tool, hands-on. We send the kids home to mom and dad and brother and sister, grandma and grandpa, so they can quiz them and see if they really are smarter than a fifth grader. Teachers are also provided with online resources and others for their students to help give them that effective introduction. It's called Liberty Day because every March 16th is a celebration of Liberty Day. It is the day on which our sort of patron founding father, if you will, James Madison, he's known as the father of the Constitution and father of the Bill of Rights. He was born on March 16th, 1751. Liberty Day, the day, is just a few days away, a Monday. That day, I am strongly encouraging every listener here, if you are able in the morning, going to work a little late if you can. We're going to be having a very special event with 100 fifth graders dressed in their red Liberty Day kids shirts at the Colorado State Capitol, starting on the west steps, then going inside, where they will be quizzing legislators, staff, lobbyists, visitors, and others on basic facts of the U.S. Constitution. And not only that, for the third year in a row, the State House of Representatives is welcoming several of these kids to both lead in the Pledge of Allegiance and also read the Declaration of Independence on the floor of the State House. So there will be fifth graders on the floor of the State House reading our nation's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, and also asking questions on the Constitution. So we cover both bases. Not only that, George Washington himself will be there making the rounds in the early part of this event, and we will be kicking it all off at 8:30 on the west steps of the Capitol with a rally and press event emceed by President Washington himself. We are going to have several speakers there. Among them, we can confirm Wayne Williams, Secretary of State, And Walker Stapleton, State Treasurer, a representative from Governor Hickenlooper's office, will be speaking as well. We're very excited about that. And in addition, we will go ahead and bring on with us a representative, a vice president, looks like, of the CEA. Yes, the Colorado Education Association, because it is a holistic effort supported by people of all stripes. I have a letter here from Congressman Ed Perlmutter, who has been a great supporter of this educational effort. You may disagree with his politics. You may disagree with the angles that he's coming from or the CEA is coming from in many different areas. I certainly do in my personal views. But at Liberty Day Institute, we're happy to work arm in arm with people regardless of their political persuasion who at least understand that giving a basic fact and concept-based education on our nation's founding documents is important. These kids are going to have a blast. Let me tell you one story from several years ago at the state capitol where we had, again, these fifth grade kids. And they're quizzing, they're asking questions of legislators and others about the Constitution. And sometimes there are people who don't get them right, including legislators who maybe should be up and up on it. And so when that happens, you can see some gumption from these kids. I mean, we've had kids say to someone who's a legislator who gets some questions wrong, wagging their finger, this little 10-year-old girl saying, "You should know this. It's your job," empowering these kids. It is exciting. It is thrilling. And we need your support and participation. And here's how you can help. Join us on the west steps of the Colorado State Capitol this Monday, March 16th, for our Liberty Day celebration. If you believe that educating youth is the path to keeping the republic, then you should be there. West steps of the Colorado State Capitol at 8:30 a.m. We're going to start with a little rally and press event, then go inside, and the kids, several of them, will read the Declaration of Independence right on the floor of the State House of Representatives. That is going to be great. Kids will also be walking around in their groups, asking questions of people. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're hoping to get some media coverage of it as well. So be sure to be there if you can. Here's some other ways that you can get involved, especially if you can't be there on Monday. If you are interested in volunteering to go speak to a fifth grade class about the Constitution, we provide the resources to the kids and also provide to you, the volunteer, a resource packet, a volunteer packet to go in and utilize in the classroom. We'll be happy to connect with you. Go to libertyday.org for that information, or tomorrow you can give our office a call at 866-718-3434. That's 866-718-3434. Or email us at mail, M-A-I-L, mail at libertyday.org if you want to volunteer to go into a class. There is a third way to help, and this one is just as important as anything else, and that is your contributions. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, again, the Liberty Day Institute, relying upon the support of individuals like you to help make this possible. We have groups and organizations, Rotary Clubs, Lions Clubs, the Daniels Fund, political organizations, a number of others that are contributing to this effort, but we still are shy of our budget. Every dollar can help, and it is tax deductible, folks. So if you go to libertyday.org, there's an icon there for you to be able to donate. Please go ahead and do that, and you can feel free to shoot us an email if you have a specific school or school district that you'd really like that money to go towards. We'll see if we can't work with you to make that happen, because we are in the school system, ladies and gentlemen. It is happening in classrooms across this state and in other parts of the country. This isn't just a pie-in-the-sky theory. Wouldn't it be great to teach kids about the Constitution? It's something that is happening in schools now. We are able to reach at least 40 to 50,000 fifth graders in this year and into next school year with the support of current donors and looking for the help of others as well. So again, libertyday.org is where you can go for more details. Monday on the west steps of the state capitol, 8:30 is when this rally with 100 fifth graders will take place. If you want to see some smart kids who've been studying up on the Constitution, this is a great opportunity to do that. Now, I want to also stress one other thing in this segment I'm turning into a PSA, and that is, there are a lot of people who say, why are you focusing on fifth grade? Don't we need to worry about high school students or college students who are just new voters or they're about to start voting? And I'd say yes, absolutely. There've got to be programs for those kids, and there definitely are programs for high school students and college students. But there's nothing in the country like what Liberty Day Institute is and is doing for fifth graders who are learning in the curriculum, learning about the Constitution, the Declaration, the founding of our country for the very first time. Nobody else is doing this, and nobody else is doing this in the way that we do with classroom volunteers, elected officials, attorneys, others. I can tell you, just yesterday, we had a group of homeless kids in Arizona who had a presentation from Dick Monfort, owner of the Rockies. Dick Monfort came and spoke to these kids, taking his time with these kids to speak to them about the Constitution. Isn't that wonderful? Homeless kids who you might otherwise think have no hope, teaching them about the hope and the greatness that is the United States of America. We need to make sure that when our youth are learning about this country or learning about what it means to be an American for the very first time, that they are getting an introduction that does justice to justice, so that we may educate youth in order to keep the republic, as Ben Franklin said. It's so crucial. And by the way, if we don't make sure that these tools and these resources are given to teachers so that they can do what they do best, which is educate, then by the time students do get to high school and college, it just may well be too late. That's why you have to start now. And that's why Liberty Day Institute does what we do at libertyday.org with the support of Republicans and Democrats alike. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Check it out, libertyday.org. We'll be back to politics on the other side of the break with Laura Carno, 303-477-5600. Speaking for the Grassroots, it's Grassroots Radio Colorado. Jimmy Sengenberger here with you in for Chris Cook this evening, 303-477-5600, as we head back in to that depth of despair known as politics. Here on KLZ 560, Hillary Clinton, man, talk about somebody who doesn't really get it. But then again, do the Clintons really have to get it? Sort of like Barack Obama. They don't really have to get it. They can just do what they want, and they'll get away with it. Although, fortunately, for some reason, Hillary hasn't exactly been getting away with this one. At least not yet. Because many, even in the liberal media, on MSNBC and elsewhere, as we talked about in the first segment, have been going after her. I want to get the perspective this evening of one of Colorado's leading conservative women. Laura Carno is a conservative strategist and political commentator. She frequently speaks on radio stations across this country, discussing the proper role of government and government officials, often discussing, and we know this from recalls and other efforts that she has been involved in, addressing politicians who think that they are above citizens and above the law. Laura Carno joins us now here on KLZ 560, a station I know she is well known on. Laura, welcome to the show. I don't think we've ever talked on the air before. It's great to do so.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy. I don't think so either, so I'm glad we've gotten this opportunity.
Absolutely. So what is your takeaway here? Hillary Clinton getting into this scandal with all this news coming out, and then yesterday in a press conference she says, I did it for convenience because somehow magically you're not supposed to be able to have two email addresses on the same device, even though I've got proof here in my hand that you can.
Right. And, you know, when you were introducing me and talking about politicians who think they are above the citizens, there is no greater picture of that than the Clintons, and in this case, Hillary Clinton. So it's interesting. She says, I know it's the law. I'm paraphrasing here. She didn't say this. I know it's the law, but it was inconvenient for me. And I just wonder how she would feel if we all of a sudden thought that, gosh, filing my taxes might not be convenient for me, or stopping for red lights. That if you don't like the law, change it. But if it's the law, it does apply to everyone, including the Clintons.
Now, they say that she didn't break any laws, and indeed, in her mind as well, that she didn't do anything wrong. And, of course, for example, on Sunday, Lanning Davis, who's a shill for the Clintons, was on some of the Sunday shows, Fox News Sunday in particular, just adamantly saying she not only didn't break any laws, but she did absolutely nothing wrong. Is this just something in Clinton land?
Well, in Clinton speak, too. So I would ask the question, and I'm not a lawyer, but I would ask the question, where do you draw the line between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law? And for a woman who has said over and over that she's transparent, she wants everything out there, she knew dang well what she was doing when she had her own server at her house. And she knew that this was something that would help protect her from all of her information getting out into the public domain. So I don't believe anything she's saying about this. I think she knows exactly what she did, and she's just trying to figure out how to say it the best she can so as not to completely end her presidential aspirations.
I've noticed something very striking in the last week, Laura Carno, and that is that many on the left, although there are some who've been defending her, there's also been many who have been attacking her on this issue. I've got a few ideas that I posed earlier in the program as to why that's the case, but I'm wondering, what do you think is the reason why some of these hard left liberals are going after Hillary on this?
Yeah, I think that the hard left, your question almost has the answer in it. The hard left, meaning Obama, Valerie Jarrett, Elizabeth Warren, they want somebody far left in the White House, and Hillary's not actually very far left, according to them. And there have been a lot of articles out there over the last few days surmising and questioning whether or not the White House leaked some information, has been getting information out there. And when I saw Andrea Mitchell from NBC News questioning Hillary Clinton at her press conference yesterday and saying, well, if you deleted some of the personal emails, how do we know you didn't delete some of the business emails? And it really kind of ticked Hillary Clinton off. And it seemed like she wasn't used to getting that sort of challenge from the network news. So I think there's a lot of truth in that. It'll be interesting to see the details emerge as time goes on.
What's also striking is Steve Hayes of the Weekly Standard came out today on Fox News and pointed this out. He said 2 of Hillary Clinton's top aides used personal email while they were employed at the State Department. Uma Abedin and Cheryl Mills, Hillary Clinton's chief of staff, and the State Department has evidence of this. He says, the question I think will become, were they emailing with Hillary Clinton from their personal email addresses to her personal email address about State Department business, about Benghazi, including sensitive classified information? Remember, just yesterday, Laura, Hillary insisted that the emails that she was sending out were almost entirely to other government emails, and therefore they would be captured immediately.
Sure, almost all. And when I heard her in her press conference say that, I thought, gosh, I wonder if the almost all includes anything important. So if she had, like you say, her 2 assistants, her 2 deputies, that would have been the bulk of her email and the bulk of her sensitive email. Of course, she was being very smart in the Clinton thou shalt protect thyself way by doing that, but it's not the spirit of the law. It's not transparent. That was government business. It was supposed to be conducted on government servers.
But was at the time in an administration that sees itself as above the law, though. And that's because they aren't they? I mean, President Obama is pretty much a king. He can go and decide that he wants to legalize 5 million people that are here illegally if he wants to. He can go ahead and implement all sorts of new environmental regulations. So why can't Hillary just use whatever email she wants?
Sure, or try to outlaw a a certain type of ammunition, which he failed at. But you're right. There is an idea that, okay, well, the president and his administration, I'll just use her as an extension of his administration for a moment, even though she's not there anymore, they can do anything they want until he gets impeached or until he's out of office. And our Constitution, I was hearing you talk about your Liberty Day, the Constitution actually restricts the government from doing things. It restrains the government. It's not that they just get to do whatever they want while they're in power, and they just don't really understand that.
And so what is this mentality? I mean, it's not just the Clintons, it's not just Obama. It transcends party lines oftentimes. What is it that happens to so many of these people when they go to Washington, D.C. in these positions of power and they find themselves thinking they're above the law or thinking that they don't have to respect the spirit of the law?
Right. And, I look at the voters and I say, what have collectively the voters given us? And we can really pay a lot of close attention to this when it's a city council race in our neighborhood. It's a school board race in our neighborhood. And you know a lot about these people, and you know who you're voting for, and you know what they stand for. To a certain extent, we know that about U.S. senators and congresspeople and presidents, based on all of their public appearances and what opposition research digs up on them and so forth. But so many people don't pay the kind of attention that we wish they would pay to how these candidates feel about the Constitution. Do they see it as a document that restrains the government, or do they see it as a document that tells people what they may or may not do? And we just launched a website and a Facebook page called Politicians Are Not Kings. So it's politiciansarenotKings.com, and then on Facebook, Politicians Are Not Kings. And that's exactly what we're going after. We don't live in a country where we have kings and we, the subjects, have to apply to the king to tell us what business we might open or where we might live or what kind of job we might have. We don't do that. This is America. We are free citizens, free from our government. And there are a lot of people who just don't get that. On politiciansarenotKings.com, our first web ad is about Hillary Clinton, coincidentally. But we will be going after all kinds of politicians, some on the right side of the aisle as well.
So here's the interesting question. I want to ask you this before we go to a break, and then let's talk a little bit more about this concept of politicians are not kings with our guest, Laura Carno. And that is it just, where the politicians come down, though, on this idea of what is the purpose of the Constitution and the purpose of government? Or is it also whether or not the public at large understands the purpose and intent of these kinds of things?
Okay, and we'll talk about that after the break. You want to start talking about it?
Go ahead. That's the question for now.
Yeah. So that is the key question. When a public understands what the Constitution is for, then we will elect people who understand that. And let me just throw out gun control, for example. We have in Colorado pro-gun Democrats in the state House and state Senate. A lot of states don't have pro-gun Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you're anti-gun. I look at that as the outcome of voters on both sides of the aisle becoming more pro-gun. So if you look at Rasmussen poll from the fall last year, 52% of Americans, so a majority now, believe that we need more protection of gun rights rather than more gun control. So you look at that 52% and you say some of those people are Democrats, and so there are some Democrats that are getting elected who are pro-gun. And I think that if you use that as just sort of the microcosm of what we're talking about with the whole Constitution and the Bill of Rights, as more people understand that the Constitution should restrain government, we will get more legislators who understand that as well.
Excellent point. Laura Carno, our guest. IamCreatedEqual.com is one of her websites. Also, be sure to check out Politicians are not kings.com. We're going to continue with this conversation right here on Grassroots Radio Colorado. On the other side of the break, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger filling in for Chris Cook. If you want to be a part of the program, 303-477-5600 is the telephone number that connects you right here on KLZ 560. On the hunt for what's best for the United States of America, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger in for Chris Cook on Grassroots Radio Colorado, the voice of the Liberty Movement, KLZ 560, 303-477-5600 is the telephone number to be a part of the festivities. If you want to chime in with your thoughts on some of the topics that we're discussing in the context very much of Hillary Clinton's sense that she's sort of a queen. Obama's a king, Hillary's a queen. She can do whatever she wants with her email. Very pleased to have on the program with us Laura Carno, conservative strategist and political commentator. One of her websites, a brand new one, is politiciansarenotKings.com. You know what I got to say I love about that, Laura, is that it does not specifically address one political party, because we understand that, like, the Constitution really is for everybody, and there are different interpretations at times, but we get to have our views and express them, but also the notion that attacking politicians is not just for one political party or another. But the other thing, B, is that you're talking about politicians, especially people who are more career-oriented, who want to be in these positions of power and get set in this mindset that they should be able to do whatever they want. Talk to us about the choice of language of politicians are not kings.
It's a good question, and I just want to throw out my other main website is lauracarno.com. Right. So we've got all three of those websites. We somehow keep them straight. But when we were doing our ads, you mentioned the recalls earlier. And in 2013, well before any of the recalls started, when there were gun bills going on in Denver, and everybody was very concerned about all of this new gun control, one of my radio ads started with that line, politicians are not kings. And then it said, let me say that again, politicians are not kings. It's not their job to tell us how to blah, 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 blah. Because politicians think they should tell us how to defend ourselves, what kind of light bulb we should use and what kind of car to drive and all that. And so I had it in an ad. It felt right in that ad. And we have been using it ever since because it really resonates. You know, when you are doing your taxes or you're applying for a business license or going to get your driver's license renewed at the DMV, and you come face to face with government, and sometimes the experiences are good, and sometimes you're just left with this feeling of, why do they get to make the rules? They work for me. I am the taxpayer, and it just doesn't feel right to people. So politicians are not kings is a really good shortcut for people to understand who should be making the decision. Should it be my choice, or should the government control it? Absolutely. I mean, and this is the thing that I think we're seeing on some level is a resurgence of this sense. You talked about it in the last segment, Laura, with regards to the gun bills and the pushback, and alluded to it here again. What we've seen from the American people, and particularly those in Colorado, saying we really don't like it when the government takes these rights away from us. But at the same time, there still does seem to be this pronounced sense among Americans across the country and even across different political spectrums, despite some of the pushback, that the government does have authority to do certain things, or that the government should be empowered to control things that relate to our welfare, or to provide certain things like health care and so forth. Do you think that there's some way to relate, for example, the idea that government should provide things to people, and the fact that, as you and I know, that's not the role of government, and to relate that somehow to this notion of politicians are not kings? You know, the language that I find most universally understandable and relatable and sort of gets people in the heart instead of the mind is this notion of choice and control. Yes. And so even if you've got somebody who really feels very sad about the plight of the poor or the homeless, let's say, Should government be the one to control this? And you and I know, and there's been a lot written on this, government does almost nothing well. When government has a problem to fix, they almost always make it worse. And so if this person who has this pain in their heart for the homeless or the poor, should it be up to them to choose how to help the poor, or should government control it? And most people get that, even if it's not about them. It's a little bit easier to say, should Michael Bloomberg control your choice of soda, or should you have that choice? Most people get that. And it just becomes a little bit more difficult when you say, gosh, these poor people who don't have health insurance, shouldn't they get that? But you can still make that work, and universily people get that. Not those on the very far left. They'll never understand it, but that's okay. I think that the movement is in that direction, which is good.
So are you optimistic then? You seem pretty optimistic.
I am very optimistic. So I've been working in this world, this strange political world, since 2008 and doing my own thing since 2012. And very simple language like what we're talking about, not political language, not the stuff you hear on normal political commercials, but really normal basic language like who should make that decision for your family, you or a bureaucrat in Washington. Most people get that. So I am very encouraged. Hillary is very interesting for women because people are trying to say she's a great role model. We need a female president. She's going to be our first female president. And I'll tell you what, people are they're not buying that. They're not seeing that she's the woman of the future. They see she's the woman of the past.
Yeah, it is an interesting concept, isn't it? Determining what is sort of and I want to take an even further step back to 2008. Where that seemed to be the determination of the Democrats, where they decided Barack Obama is our leader of the future. Hillary Clinton is passé. And so that begs the question, what has really changed? Are they just out of options?
Well, and here's what's interesting. So there is a feeling on the left. Let me just say, Hillary supporters. Let me put that category together. Hillary supporters believe that it's time and she is due. So this is an entitlement thing. It's time for a woman. But, women have worked for decades to demonstrate our equality in the workplace. And before I was in politics, I worked in the corporate world, and I'm much, much older than you, Jimmy. So there was a time when there were very few women in management in the industry that I was in. And we demonstrated our equality, and we did that by being very competent. We were accountable for our work. If we made a mistake, it was our accountability. We were authentically us. We didn't have to act like a guy. We could just be who we are. And we had to be very consistent in our performance. And so the things that have demonstrated that women are equal, Hillary doesn't do any of that. You can't name any accomplishments of hers. Anything that goes wrong, she's always deflecting it from like vast right-wing conspiracy decades ago to what difference does it make?
Well, and this email thing begs the question, the vast left-wing conspiracy. I want to just step in real quick to get a quick call here. I'd be remiss not to go to Jim because he's got such a great name. Jim in Denver, you're on with Jimmy Sengenberger, in for Chris Cook and Laura Carno.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to mention, I just heard the talk about Hillary. Hillary does not deserve to be president. The only reason she's even talked about is because she was the wife of Bill Clinton, and that doesn't make her any sort of candidate to be president. Similar to Barack Obama, the guy had no reason to be even running. But nevertheless, my reason for calling is the fact that I'm 57 and I despise the government at this point. I am so sick of everything they do, the way they intrude in my life. I can't take them any longer. I can understand the anger, but my anger isn't limited to anger. It's limited to rage at this point. And that's my comment. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Jim. Laura, we've got about 30 seconds here. What's your response? Because that is a palpable anger we see from so many Americans.
Absolutely. So you need to figure out where you're going with your anger and who you can help. There are lots of folks, whether it's me or a really great candidate who understands the Constitution, but do something with that anger that's helpful and that can help you feel optimistic about what you can do for the future.
Yeah, constructive, absolutely. So, Laura, give us your 3 websites again.
Sure. LauraCarno.com, IamCreatedEqual.com, and then on politiciansarenotKings.com, click on the picture of Hillary to get that video.
Thank you very much, Laura Carno. Great to talk with you. Look forward to it again. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, in for Chris Cook. We'll be back for Hour 2 in just a few moments.
Outside of the Bible, the greatest 2 documents that have ever been penned are the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence. And the reason those 2 documents have lasted for 230 years is because they were written on the knees of the framers.
This is the voice of the Colorado Liberty Movement.
I'm not a 6th grader. It's fine you want to lecture me on the Constitution. I studied the Constitution myself. I am reasonably well educated.
Live from Studio 56, this is Grassroots Radio Colorado.
Let's be clear about one thing. We're not here to rebrand a party. We're not here to put a fresh coat of rhetorical paint on our party. We're not here to abandon our principles in a contest of government giveaways. We're here to rebuild a country.
Now,
Grassroots Radio Colorado on KLZ 560.
freedom, liberty, truth.
American woman, I said get away. American woman, listen what I say.
Chris Cook decided she'd get away for the evening, hand it over to an American man. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, here with you. It's now the 2nd hour of Grassroots Radio Colorado. What a pleasure to talk with Laura Carno. Talk about a great leader for liberty across this country. We're seeing more and more people like her start popping up, and it is a wonderful sight to behold. 303-477-5600 is our telephone number here on KLZ 560. Bottom of the hour, we will be joined by Rich Bratton of Principles of Liberty for an update on what's going on in the Colorado State Legislature, because it is so important that we stay abreast of everything that is happening in the state legislature, not just Washington, D.C., and around the world. So breaking news coming from Fox News this evening, Megyn Kelly reporting that all State Department employees must sign a Form OF 109. The form, I'm told, says that every employee, when leaving the State Department, has surrendered all emails, even unclassified emails. Hillary Clinton did not surrender anything for 2 years since leaving the State Department. The form says failure to do so immediately is a felony. Wondering, could Hillary Clinton be under any sort of legal trouble? Then it's also the case that the Associated Press, the left-wing media, now apparently is part of a vast left-wing conspiracy going after Hillary Clinton. The Associated Press is also filing a lawsuit because they are claiming that the State Department has blocked access to information for 5 years. Isn't this the administration that promised when Obama was running for office and then after he took office that he would be the most transparent president and that this would be the most transparent administration in history? And yet we have the same old Clinton-style politics in the State Department and in the White House because they believe that, contrary to what Laura Carno will say, politicians are kings. They are above the law and they can do what they want no matter what we, the little people of America, would like to say about it. So here we've got Hillary Clinton not abiding the policies that her department sets in place. So if she's unwilling to be a role model for others because she is top dog in the State Department, what does that mean for a President, Hillary Clinton? How grandiose might she think her power then? If we think Obama's this bad, could Hillary take it to the next level? Could things get even worse under a Clinton 2.0 presidency with Hillary and this arrogant mindset? It's frightening if you think about it, especially because there is, like it or not, let's be honest here, there's a good chance Hillary Clinton could be the next president of the United States, especially if, God forbid, we nominated a squish like Jeb Bush. Imagine the consequences of a Jeb Bush and the number of conservatives who would say, I don't really see a difference. I don't really see much of a difference between Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush. So I'm going to sit out this presidential election. We hear that kind of discussion here on KLZ 560, and it's not without some merit to it. There is a logical sense that so many people have that there isn't much of a difference. So what if we get a Jeb Bush as our nominee up against Hillary Clinton? And Jeb Bush likely to lose an election like that. Then we end up stuck with Hillary. That's why we need a true leader, a true conservative. We need somebody like a Bobby Jindal or a Scott Walker in the White House who has executive experience, who's been successful, and who has blazed glorious trails of conservatism. And by glorious trails of conservatism, I mean a successful track record. I don't mean rhetoric. I don't mean something that gets people blood pumping and that's it. Although we do need that kind of energy and enthusiasm in the conservative movement. We can't continue to allow negativity to surge through our bones and get us engaged in the political process. We have to start being more positive and more forthright in our views in a way that is more Reagan-esque, that looks to optimism and not pessimism. Laura Carno was just sharing an optimistic vision for the country and for the direction we are taking as a people. And I like to think that isn't unwarranted. I like to think that I'm fairly optimistic, too, about what we are seeing in this country, and it's a good thing. But we have to be asking ourselves, as conservatives and as Americans, what can we do to make sure that somebody like Hillary Clinton can be stopped and that we have a true conservative leader in the White House? Extremely, extremely important. And here's another point that Charles Krauthammer brought up. This is about judgment. Do you really want to trust her judgment? The one thing that she hasn't discussed on any level is who decides what's the government and what falls under government business or what is private. She's saying that she deleted private emails. But who's deciding? Hillary Clinton is deciding. As Krauthammer says, no one has asked her whether in the criteria that her staff used before destroying the 30,000 emails, they decided that the communications about the Clinton Foundation and the contributions of other governments was a private or public issue. I suspect it was all deleted, but we won't know. She needs to be asked. And if the Associated Press is now suing her, suing the State Department, that and the congressional committees are going to force, ultimately, revelations. This is big. The problem with the Hillary Clinton is that they are so caught up in their ego that when they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, they don't know how to defend themselves. They don't know how to fend off against danger. They don't know how to address point blank and honestly what they're caught doing. But that is the nature of the Clinton-Obama machines. They don't want to be straightforward and honest. They can't be. Because if they do, they lose. They don't become President of the United States or even Secretary of State. But going along with the criticism from the left, Robert Gibbs on MSNBC just yesterday saying, I will say, waiting 8 days to say what they said yesterday, so I guess it was happening today, this happened, what I'm reading you, from Robert Gibbs, former White House press secretary, says, I will say waiting 8 days to say what they said yesterday was startling to Democrats. I doubt there was anything said yesterday that couldn't have been said last Wednesday or Thursday or Friday and put a little bit of this story to bed a lot earlier. I think not having the apparatus of a campaign, even though everybody on the planet knows she's a candidate for president, I think hurt her in this instance. And I think they also didn't understand who were the stakeholders in this, and that is the media. The media was vested rightly, I think, in asking serious questions, and they had surrogates on TV actually making it seem as if Republicans were pushing these questions. And I think in many ways that emboldens the media. They were trying to play partisan games here by making it seem like it was only partisan Republicans attacking, which was not happening at all. This is fascinating. Liberal turning on liberal, folks. Something we got to keep watching, because for a while conservatives have been turning on conservatives. Well, now to see it happening on the other side, well, there's a certain poetic justice to it, don't you think? I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. This is Grassroots Radio Colorado, regularly hosted by Chris Cook. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to continue on the other side. A couple other topics I want to hit before we get into conversation about what's going on in the state legislature with none other than Rich Bratton of Principles of Liberty at principlesofliberty.org. So keep it right here on KLZ 560. Again, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, in for Chris Cook. You know, whenever I come onto a show, I can't help but bring what I consider to be the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy Sengenberger in for Chris Cook on Grassroots Radio Colorado, KLZ 560. Rich Bratton at the bottom of the hour from Principles of Liberty, principlesofliberty.org. By the way, we just heard mention in the break of Randy Corcoran's program, Wake Up with Randy Corcoran, Monday through Friday here on KLZ 560 from 5 to 8 in the morning. Tomorrow, could it be the last appearance of Mark Baisley as vice chair of the Colorado Republican Party? Very rousing debate between him and Derek Wilburn yesterday at the Liberty Libations meeting. A large crowd, 70 people I counted, somewhere around there. It's remarkable to see the fervor in this. So that'll be very interesting. But I know that here on Grassroots Radio Colorado, you had the announcement made exclusively here by Ryan Call when he originally announced that he was running for re-election as state party chair before Steve House got into the race. If you are interested in hearing Ryan Call since then, go to my website, jimmysengenberger.com. We asked some good questions of Ryan in an hour that I have posted there. If you go to jimmysengenberger.com, my website, take a listen to that. Also an hour with Steve House is there. All the vowels in Sengenberger are E. There's no A, there's no I, there's no U. Once you know that, Sengenberger is easy. So jimmysengenberger.com. Check it out right there if you want to listen. A very fascinating conversation first with Ryan Call and then with Steve House. Again, our number here, KLZ 560 303-477-5600. Rick in Centennial joins us now here on Grassroots Radio Colorado. Again, Jimmy Sengenberger in for Chris Cook. How you doing, Rick?
Great, Jimmy. Great to hear you on some day besides Saturday, Jimmy. And, you know, got to say, I was very impressed with your interview with Steve House. He's my guy for, I think you do a great job for chairman of our party.
All right. Well, as I said, they've heard him a lot here on KLZ. And if you go to jimmysengenberger.com, you can hear my interview with him as well as mine with Ryan Call. But thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Jimmy. Jimmy, on the issue of squishes and how to best to beat Hillary. I agree with you. There will be a lot of people, if Jeb Bush gets nomination, who will not vote. I certainly would never vote for Hillary, but I'll vote as a Libertarian. I won't go for Jeb Bush. But I've got to disagree with you. For me, Scott Walker now is absolutely off I won't vote for him for three reasons. One is, first of all, I think he'd have trouble winning. Where this email thing might come to something, it might come to nothing. Benghazi's not going to go away. People died there. That's going to hang around her neck. But Scott Walker is so, well, let's say unstudied, kind of naive on foreign policy. I can see Hillary Clinton getting away with brushing it off in debates with Scott Walker because he'll be.
Give me one example. One example where you see Scott Walker as being particularly naive on foreign policy.
Well, a couple things. One, he pronounced that the most significant foreign policy decision ever was Ronald Reagan's decision to fire the PATCO employees, the union, the air controller folks. And he said the reason that was significant is because it sent a scary message to other foreign leaders. And they asked him, well, any documentation of this? And he said he had it, but he didn't. And also the other thing, too, he said about foreign policy was he said, well, at one point he says, well, we need a more aggressive foreign policy. And then he said, well, I want to make sure terrorism doesn't wash up on our shores. Well, the closest we ever had terrorism recently to washing up on our shores is when Obama saw fit to get involved in the Libyan civil war, and that engendered the underwear bomber. So I think he hasn't made a study of it. I think he's been a fine governor in combating the unions in Wisconsin. The second thing, then, is the second rap against him, then, is that he's, now we're approaching election, and he was for amnesty. Now, voila, Scott Walker says he's against amnesty. Now, I was disturbed by that. It's a flip-flop. But for me, the unforgivable one is he's going into Iowa right now, Jimmy, and he says now he's for this corn subsidies that yield the what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the corn subsidies for ethanol and things along those lines. Yeah,
and that's crony capitalism. That's corporate. It's everything we fight against. But he's going into Iowa, and he's now
I got to ask you though. Other than maybe Rand Paul, who at least cuts through that. How many other candidates are really going to stand by their position that, rightly so, we should no longer be giving subsidies for things like ethanol, especially in Iowa?
I think.
Let's be honest here.
Rand Paul would be certainly. That's why I'm for Rand Paul. I think we could count on some constitutional fidelity and some principled fidelity from Ted Cruz too. I'm not sure of that, but what do you think?
I am not sure. As a matter of fact, I would wager, before I would wager otherwise, I would wager that Rand Paul is the only one who's really going to make a stink out of the idea that we shouldn't have corn subsidies. It's one thing that I love about Rand Paul is those kinds of positions, but I won't even be surprised if Ted Cruz stands up and says, or at least doesn't denounce the idea. Maybe he's not going to be so fervently in favor of it or something like that, but at the very least, these people, I don't think most of them are going to denounce it because it's one of those popular issues, and I don't think that too many of them like to step on it. But I hope I'm mistaken on that. Well, but I don't think Walker's going to be alone by any stretch of the means, even from true conservatives.
Well, it's still bad. Then I think Doris Kern was the guest with Matt Dunn, and she said, "Well, now we've had 2 flip-flops so far, very many more," and he starts to lose credibility. Well, can you imagine, Jimmy? Them saying that about Ronald Reagan or even Rand Paul. Now, no more flip-flops. Come on. I mean, we're so deep in big government now. We need a leader with fidelity to the principles of small government, right from the start for him to.
Yeah. But you know what? Those are things for Walker. I don't agree with you at all, and I don't really want to get into it because I think it'd be too much of an in-depth conversation. But on what you said on his foreign policy, I don't recall him even saying the most significant. I know he said it was a significant decision of Ronald Reagan with the air traffic controllers, but not that it was the most significant foreign policy decision. I don't think he said most.
He said that. I thought that's the quote, but that we can check that.
I don't believe he said most. I mean, that would be be naive if he said that was the single most significant foreign policy decision in the history of this country. I mean, what about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I mean, let's start with that. But then the whole argument of on our shores, I think he's very much right, but that doesn't mean that he would necessarily agree with Obama's approach to Libya or something like that. On the issue of illegal immigration, honestly, I don't know his position closely enough on that. I will say I want to look into that. Corn subsidies, I don't think is, to me, all that big of an issue because I think most of the candidates are going to be taking that sort of position. But if those are your three criticisms, I'm not all that concerned about Scott Walker personally. Really? But I know it's, even if most of the Republicans, but isn't that a big thing for you? We can't have, right off the bat, having big government corporate welfare. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. You're not for that, Jimmy. I know you're not. No, absolutely. But I'm just saying that's one issue where I think almost all of the candidates are going to be on an even level. And so I don't think that that's a very good launching point to then addressing these other issues. I think Scott Walker's got a great resume and reputation, and there's a reason why he may not be first to so many, but he's second to probably the majority of Republicans in their selection. Not me, not anymore. I can't imagine. You think back, presidents that have met the call when we needed a good guy. You can't imagine Ronald Reagan saying, "Hey, maybe some corn subsidies are all right." It's not going to happen. And I think even now, Rand Paul isn't as firm as his dad, but he still would never go along with something like that. Sure. Well, and you know what? I do admire that. I certainly would never want to go over and agree with something like corn subsidies, but I'm just saying I think the majority of these candidates will. Anyway, Rick and Centennial, thank you very much for the call this evening. 303-477-5600. It is an interesting question. Scott Walker is obviously imperfect. There are issues to disagree on. Are these significant enough? Well, I don't really think so. I want to look into this idea that he flip-flopped on amnesty. I want to look into that a little bit more closely and see how that happened and how that really compares. If he did, I want to see a good reason for it, because at least he is coming up with an explanation in that case for taking a different position, whereas Jeb Bush keeps doubling and tripling down on his position and saying, no, I believe in this. I'm going to stand by it. I will lose the primary election on my position when it comes to amnesty. And then with regards, of course, to corn subsidies, I think we talked about that a great deal. I totally agree with Rick. Corn subsidies are a monstrosity. They've increased food prices significantly. They've increased fuel prices significantly. The subsidies are a terrible thing. But at the same time, I don't think it's a determining factor in the Republican nomination for president. Anyway, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, in for Chris Cook here on Grassroots Radio Colorado. Rich Bratton is next on KLZ 560. Rocking and rolling back at 7:33 as Grassroots Radio Colorado. Jimmy Sengenberger in for Chris Cook this evening. Thank you so much for being a part of the program and having a blast here on KLZ 560. Talking about, in a lot of ways, a lot of the national issues and candidates and discussions and topics and those kinds of things. But I want to break it down a little bit here on the program to the state level, or bring it down to the state level at the state legislature. Always great to get updates on what is happening down there at the Golden Dome. Here on KLZ 560 from Rich Bratton of Principles of Liberty at principlesofliberty.org, where you can catch their regular reports on what is happening at the state legislature. And Rich Bratton joins us now. Rich, it is good to talk with you, my friend. How you been? It's been a while.
Jimmy, I'm doing great. It's great to hear your voice. Great to be on with you. Let me set down my air guitar over here. I love that bumper music. I was getting into that a little bit.
Hey, that's what I do, brother. I bring on the best bumper music any show I fill in on.
But no, it's great. I'm really glad too that you want to talk a little bit about what's going on at the state level. You're right. There's so many things to keep an eye on, and So what we do at Principles of Liberty is just try to focus only on at the state level, and in particular at the state legislature, which would mean our House and Senate.
Now, review for us, I know listeners are very familiar with how it works, I'm sure, but review for us the method. What is sort of the method of approach that you guys take at Principles of Liberty when determining whether or not a bill that has been proposed really is in line with those principles?
Right. Great question. My background, I'm an actuary. I'm a fellow Society of Actuaries. I'm a CFA, I'm a numbers guy. I used to be a math teacher, a physics teacher, high school. So I'm kind of wonky that way. And so we really try to be objective, analytical, consistent, logical, and rational in our approach. So what we've done over the last 5 years is we've identified principles, and we try to use those as our metric or our filter through which we read legislation. And we analyze all the legislation, about 650 bills on average a year. And so what's different about that versus other great groups out there, great single-issue groups, whether they're gun groups or, tree hugger groups or whatever groups, they tend to be single-issue. For us, we're not issues-oriented. We're strictly principles-oriented, and it's basically free people, free markets, and good government. And so once we define those principles, and you can take our training class to kind of find out how that works, but we actually have a worksheet, and it's an interactive worksheet where for each principle, we ask about half a dozen questions, and you fill out the worksheet and say, does this question apply? And if it does, is it yes or no? And it helps you work through logically, does this principle apply? Does this principle apply? And does this principle apply? So it's kind of a crowdsourcing approach. We have our volunteer email list, not just our report, but our volunteer email list is over 70 people. And so people will get them on an email on Thursday or Friday, and I'll say, here are the bills on the calendar next week. So there's maybe 40 of them. These are the ones we need to look at this weekend. People go and they see if something's interesting. They've been through our training. They go through the analysis. They'll do some research, and then they'll send in their analysis worksheets. And then over the weekend, I kind of correlate them, corroborate them, and put them all together. And then on Sunday night, usually about 2 in the morning or so, we get finished putting it together, and then we send out our analysis. And it's usually about, anywhere from 15 to 25 bills. And our approach is a couple of things. One, we're rating these bills before people start voting on them because we want to be part of the process. We're not trying to come in afterwards and say, after the fact, you should have done this or you should have done that. So we try to rate them before people start voting on them. And if we feel like we can rate it, we rate it. So there's no picking and choosing. Last year we rated 274 bills. And if we feel like we can make a clear case to rate this bill one way or the other, bam, we rate it. And if there's conflicting principles, maybe something's good on individual liberty but bad on property rights or, free markets or something like that. And it's conflicting and it's not clear-cut, then we don't rate it. Or if it's a silly bill, like the state cactus shall be the buttercup cactus. That would be a bill we're not going to bother rating, stuff like that.
Really? You don't think that that's an affront to liberty, Rich Bratton? All right, let's go through some of these specific ones. It is interesting when you go through the reports to see how many you support versus how many principles of liberty suggest should be opposed. I want to start with a couple support ones, and one that strikes home to me because we've been seeing these debates over religious freedom and so forth is HB 151171, the State Freedom of Conscience Protection Act. Very strong language there.
Yeah, it is. When we initially rated this one, started reviewing this one, we had a lot of questions from a lot of sides on this one, and we were considering not rating this one. I'll be honest with you. We asked the bill sponsors for some, supplemental information, and kind of what pushed us over the edge is that this law basically is copy and paste from federal legislation that was passed in 1993. So there's federal legislation that already exists with pretty much this wording in it. And I don't know if we put the link in there on this particular report. So when we researched this, we went to the federal legislation and looked at it, and about 25 states have it. And we asked some tough questions to the people who are pushing this bill. We're like, hey, can people use this to hide behind, bad things. If whether it's the Branch Davidians, or whether it's some kind of a sect, or whether it's a terrorist organization or whatever, could they use this law to hide behind it? And, we were convinced by some of the evidence that was given to us, and especially the fact that it's a federal statute, that we thought that it was actually a decent law. So we're not going to shy away from that. We believe in the First Amendment, which means the freedom to associate. Now, liberty and freedom can be uncomfortable. It can be messy. And, it can be offensive at times. People can take it and be offensive with it. But we prefer liberty over political correctness.
Now, and part of the determination with political correctness and all those things is then who ends up making the decision as to what is or is not appropriate, or what is or is not politically correct. And it obviously has to fall to some entity on government, and that is a real affront to liberty. Another bill that you have to go down a little ways in this particular report to find the next few that are supported, but one that strikes me because I'm always frustrated when I hear stories about burdensome regulation is Senate Bill SB 15180, the Regulatory Reform Act of 2015. What is the goal here?
The goal here is to help businesses be able to comply with an incredibly growing and burdensome regulation of the state. And so what happens is, particularly small businesses, if the state regulatory agencies promulgate these rules, and they come out with them left and right. And if you're a small business, you don't have a team of lawyers that's sitting there waiting with bated breath to see what the new rules are. And so then the state turns around and comes in and audits you, and then they say, hey, you're breaking Rule XYZ. You say, you know what? When you audited me last year, you didn't mention Rule XYZ at all. They said, oh, yeah, it's a new one. We just passed it 6 months ago. And then people say, well, I didn't even know about it. And they say, oh, ignorance of the law is no excuse, unless, of course, you're a legislator or a police officer. But that's beside the point. So what this bill says is, if a rule's been around less than a year, we're going to give you get out of jail free, smack your hand, and not fine you, and give you, educate you on the rule and let you go on your way and move on. So we almost didn't rate this one because of a conflicting principle, and that was this. What we didn't like about the bill is that it focuses on businesses that employ under 100 people. And that, is we don't dig that too much because that's not applying. We think the rule of law should apply to everybody.
Absolutely.
Equally. And so that's the one downside to this bill, but we felt like it's kind of a step in the right direction. We supported it last year, and so we're just trying to get government off the backs of business.
All right. We are talking with Rich Bratton of the Principles of Liberty at principlesofliberty.org. Let's talk about some of the bills that really seem to oppose liberty in your guys' analysis, your team's analysis. And then we'll go over one bill, and then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back. What's one that you're particularly incensed about that gets you thinking this one's really terrible for this week? Rich?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your button there. I'm sorry, brother. I think arguably 1227, House Bill 1227. This is redistribution at its very finest, and I say that with a dose of sarcasm. This bill creates an income tax credit for employers to pay off people's student loans for them. So this is what some people might call cost shifting. So we're going to take that. We're going to allow tax credits to employers to pay off student loans for people. And so, who gets to pay the student loan? The person who took it out promised they'd pay it back, and that, personal responsibility? No. The taxpayers get to pay for student loans. Now, I don't know about you, but I pay taxes, and I pay my kids, college costs, which are quite expensive. I'm not digging the idea of this corporate cronyism, and it's basically cost shifting or wealth redistribution from the taxpayer to give a free pass to those who take out student loans, and we're very much against that one.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I've been out of college for 4 years now, almost, and I can't believe how long it's been and how much time has flown by. But in that time, I still owe about $17,000 in student loan debt. And this sounds all nice, give me some money for my employer. I work for Randy Corcoran, so, why not? Why not work through Randy to get some of these student loans paid off? Well, actually, gosh, there already is a way that's happening, and it's called my paycheck. And I apply that every month. Is that a concept that just isn't in existence anymore, Rich Bratton?
You personally responsible crazy kid, Jimmy. That is just crazy talk. No, it's much better to use OPM, other people's money. In this case, the taxpayers' money. So come on, get with it. This is the 21st century year of an age of entitlement. And I look at this and I say, look, you know what happened? You know why a huge reason that we're in the problem with healthcare that we are is because of government intervention. And when did it all begin? When we had wage and price controls, all right, back in the 40s, 50s. And what happened was they got around that by doing what? Giving people health care because it didn't count. They could deduct it as an expense, and it wasn't controlled by the wage and price controls, and that was the beginning of the end. As soon as you get government intervening into a market, bad things happen. We already have a humongous student loan bubble. We do not need to give people more opportunities to skate out of their responsibilities.
Absolutely. Could not agree more with that statement. Rich Bratton of Principles of Liberty, principlesofliberty.org. We're going to take a quick break here on Grassroots Radio Colorado with Jimmy Sengenberger filling in for Chris Cook. When we come back, we're going to talk about 2 or 3 more bills going on in the legislature this week that Principles of Liberty suggest you ought to join legislators in opposing and encourage your legislators to oppose. So we'll be right back with that and more in our final segment here on KLZ 560. $7:49, it's the final segment on Grassroots Radio Colorado. Jimmy Sengenberger filling in for Chris Cook this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got Rich Bratton on the line of Principles of Liberty at principlesofliberty.org. And I got to say, one of the things that most frustrates me is this notion that, well, if we can't raise taxes in a certain way, let's go ahead and raise fees or call a tax a fee or change the rules so that it is suddenly now a fee. There is one bill that addresses this. It's HB 1226, Retail Food Establishment Fees. What is going on here that is happening in terms of another attempt to deal with fees?
Well, this is a classic approach of state legislature, and that is, they love the slippery slope to big government. So, and this is a perfect example. When they initially passed a bill to set fees, of course not taxes, but to set fees for different retail food establishments, and there's I don't remember if there's dozens of them, but there's a bunch of different categories. And they charge them, these fees to get licenses and do different stuff. And this is all established by the State Board of Health. Well, when they passed the legislation, the fees were written into the legislation. Well, because they probably couldn't get a blank check if they had just passed it originally that way. Well, now what they do is you let it go for a little while, and then you come back and you say, gosh, these fees, they're old. They haven't grown with inflation because, Jimmy, inflation has just been massive in the last, 2, 3, 4 years. Yep. And so we need to catch up with that. It's not keeping up with population or the growth of retail. We need to increase these fees, doggone it. And we're handcuffed because right now the fees are written into the law. So we ought to let the State Board of Health establish the rules, the fees by rule. In other words, we ought to let them just, make the fees be whatever they think they're supposed to be. And, that way they can increase them at their leisure.
Well, that's okay, because they're the regulatory agencies, and they truly know what's best for the businesses. You don't really think the business owners know what's best for themselves, do you?
No. Business owners, retail food business owners clearly want to poison their people so that they, won't come back anymore. No, that's the silliest thing. A good business person who wants to be successful, wants to not get sued, and wants to make a profit, gasp, is going to create value and give you good food that is not going to make you sick. And just because the government says that they come in and inspect and look in somebody's kitchen once a year, if you think that's keeping your food safe, then, gosh, you might be a little too dependent on government.
One of the things I'm sick and tired of, Rich Bratton, again, our guest from Principles of Liberty, the website principlesofliberty.org to get your reports on all sorts of bills, all the bills that you can imagine, going through the legislature, being watched and monitored very closely by his crack team of volunteers who take the time to devote to your liberty, which is just wonderful. We talked about this in the opposition bill that we discussed at the end of the last segment, Rich, but there's a concept here that especially the left, but even a lot of Republicans love to use. They think oftentimes, it's better to use tax credits to do things than, say, government regulation or to tax something new or something along those lines, or just to throw money at it in terms of spending. Well, so often nowadays we see Republicans, Democrats alike try to use tax credits as a way to engage in social engineering or to achieve certain socio-political goals. HB 1238, tax credit preceptors, is another method to try to achieve something like this by building a sort of government-sponsored mentorship program through tax credits. What's going on with this one?
Right. This one, there's doctors, dentists, PTs, physician assistants, pharmacists, and things like that. They have to go through different training, and, docs or people who are established in those professions can provide what's called a preceptorship or be a preceptor, which basically is kind of like a mentor. And, you have a month-long period of mentoring or oversight or training. And so what this bill does, and what's amazing is you talk about that slippery slope again. I mean, the bill itself says, hey, this is just an initial step here. And the bill says, we hope to expand the scope of this section in future years. Right? I mean, so they tell you, look, this is just the nose under the camel's tent here. We really want to ramp this thing up because government really should be, I couldn't put it better, Jimmy, you're right, using tax policy to shape behavior. They do it through sin taxes on things that we shouldn't be doing. They try to do it with tax credits and things that they want to do. I got an idea. Why don't we just give everybody a nice, simple, low tax and let people decide what they want to do on their own?
No, see, that's too much freedom. Shoot. You're actually about liberty, principles of liberty, right? Now, the thing that gets me, though, is how there are often so many Republicans, Rich Bratton, that buy into this idea that, tax credits are better, so let's use this approach to this problem.
Sure. If you can, that way you can say that you're friendly to business, and you can go out on the stump and you can say, hey, I'll say the small businessman, which cracks me up. I think the ultimate jobs bill actually would be to say, all 100 legislators, you're fired. Go out and create a business and create jobs on your own with your own darn money. But that's just me. You're right. Both sides of the aisle do this. Some favor tax credits, and different tax, incentives to say tax breaks for certain industries. But again, they're targeting, they're picking winners and losers, and they're simply using tax policy to pick winners and losers. That's not the role of government. The role of government is to provide for free markets by protecting property rights. And that's pretty much it. Now that might mean adjudicating contracts, prosecuting fraud or things like that. But that's it. It's to protect the property rights and the rights of the individual and to allow the free markets to be free, not to intervene in them and try to shape them through tax policy.
Rich Bratton runs Principles of Liberty, principlesofliberty.org, very much reliant upon volunteers. Can people who are listening right now send in their own thoughts and reports and so forth, Rich?
Absolutely. Even if you haven't been to our training at all, it doesn't matter. If you want a voice, I'll tell you what. I mean, I get calls, texts, emails from legislators. They give us bills before they run them. We're having an influence, and you and your listeners can all be a part of that. Come to our training when we have them. We'll have them once we get out of session here. But just go to our website. And if you want one of our worksheets, shoot me an email at principlesoflibertyco@gmail.com, and we'll send you our spreadsheets, and you can look it over and play with it, and then try reading some bills. We'll tell you where to go. It's ledge.state.co, I think, .us or something like that is the legislative website, and that's where you go to read the bill. It's ledge.state.co.us, and you can get everything you need, and just try it. You send it in. We'll give you some feedback. It's an engaging, it's an opportunity for you to engage. We want to crowdsource this. We want to empower citizens. We want to assist legislators. We want to be part of the process before people start voting. We're not just trying to be angry armchair quarterbacks here. We're trying to be engaged citizens, and any of your listeners can participate at any level they want. Once a year, once a week, doesn't matter.
Principlesofliberty.org is the website. Principlesoflibertyco@gmail.com, the email, right, Rich Bratton?
You got
All right.
it,
Thank you so much, my friend. Great to talk with you. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you very much.
All right, that is it for us tonight here on Grassroots Radio Colorado. Jimmy Sengenberger in for Chris Cook. Just as a little reminder, nonpartisan, non-political, if you want to support the education of youth on the U.S. Constitution and Declaration of Independence, come to the state capitol when the Liberty Day Institute, libertyday.org, hosts 100 fifth graders, several of whom will be reading the Declaration of Independence on the floor of the State House of Representatives as they open their meeting on Monday. It's going to be great. Plus your chance to interact with these kids as they quiz you, and you could find out, are you smarter than a fifth grader when it comes to the Constitution and American government? Going to be a lot of fun. It starts with a rally and press event on the west steps of the Colorado State Capitol at 8:30, and then the fun just begins. So be sure to check that out and go to facebook.com/Liberty Day USA for details and information. All that you can get if you believe that educating youth is the way to keep the republic. We hope to see you there. Again, libertyday.org. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and keep listening. KLZ 560. Good night, Colorado.